Hello. Welcome everyone to my YouTube channel. Trader Chris here once again, and I hope we had a good week last week trading, and I can already feel that this trading week is going to be a very interesting one, really. So once again, these are my personal opinion on what I think about the market, really, but I'm much more particular about trading pound USD. So just a disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor. These are my personal opinions, and please take them with a grain of salt, really, and do your own personal research. I am not liable for any financial, uh, what I say it. Well, these are just my personal opinion. Okay, so let's get straight to business. I'm starting again the analysis from the weekly time frame. And it's obvious, like I mentioned in the previous video. If you haven't seen the previous video, please try to see it. It's 2 weeks old already. I'll try to link it somewhere in the description, where I'm still maintaining a bearish sentiment on pound USD, technically and fundamentally. If you just look at the technicals alone on the weekly time frame, we are still bearish based on structure. By structure, I mean we have not effectively created a higher resistance, and we are only creating lower support as we are pushing down currently and on a technical perspective. So really, like I mentioned in the last video, I'm still having a technical bearish sentiment on pound USD. And now, like I mentioned, that until we close and hold above this level of resistance, until we hold support above, I don't see long-term buys playing from a technical perspective, really. And yeah, so now what we have effectively created is a lower resistance on the weekly time frame, and one could then argue that if we hold support above this, then we could be bullish. But again, between here and here would then be a really dangerous zone to trade in. So again, I think the idea of waiting for confirmations above this level before considering long-term buys, I think still makes sense at the minute. So now we have created a resistance on the weekly time frame, and this is just textbook, to be, in my opinion, where we could anticipate price trying to retest this previous level of support and creating what is now a trademark in the community as triangle of love, really. So it's clear that selling makes sense this week from a technical perspective, and from a fundamental perspective, just looking at the interest rate differential, for instance. I think the Bank of England's current interest rate is still at 1.75, and that of the USD from the Federal Reserve is at 2.5. So if you compare the interest rate differential between the two currencies, you see the dollar is still stronger. And in any case, because the dollar is a world reserve currency, it's still what calls a short for every dollar pairs, really. So yeah, and again, I think I will get into that maybe later on in this video. You can remember that I think 2 weeks ago, the previous Wednesday, from the last video I made, where I mentioned that it was more than likely that the interest rate will be increased, and you see a bizarre response to that, such that even at the increase of the interest rate for the USD, dollar lost strength temporarily, but now I think it has regained the strength, and we should see some further downside on pound USD. So what I'll be watching is still this level of resistance. As long as based on price, we do not close, or price does not close above this level on the daily or on the 4-hour time frame, I'm still holding a bearish bias on pound USD. However, we can't deny the fact that this is a level of support on the weekly time frame, such that even if we are still, or I'm still looking at sells, one would not want to sell at support. So you want to sell to support and not sell at support. So that's why this line is there, just to have a visual reference, really, so that as one is planning to sell, one is also paying attention to this level of support. And one thing I've come to realize that is not just the whole support. The whole support is this whole zone really, which is between the body and the wick. So that whole zone, it's a support zone, if you can call it that. So again, to reiterate, based on the weekly time frame, everything is still bearish. It's clear that we are creating lower resistances. I'm only going to be considering long-term buys with support above here. Since we've created a lower resistance, it is, technical that we could expect some sort of downside to retest this low. And the range from here to here is, say, 188 pips. So there's a lot for everyone to profit from. But that doesn't mean to just press sell. So you then need to compare what we can see on the daily time frame. Now, it's also interesting to see that while on a weekly time frame makes sense to sell to this point, we have a level of support and resistance on the daily time frame where price previously rejected, and last Friday we also closed above. So meaning to continue the analysis based on the weekly time frame, you need a daily close below this level of support before considering the sales based on the weekly time frame. Okay, so comparing the daily and the weekly time frame, weekly says sells based on the structure we have. However, we are pushing to a level of support and resistance on the daily. So that would mean that it would be a requirement to see a close, perhaps on the 4-hour time frame or the daily, preferably below this level of support, and still have some sort of range to the downside, such that if we close below here, these weeks would not be rejection weeks again. There would be weak fill opportunity really. So closing below here for sales makes sense. However, we could also see some sort of pullbacks this week before pushing down. So the question would then be, what would be the max level of pullback? And what I'll just use is the most recent level of resistance on the daily time frame. So this is a daily resistance, and we can call this a daily support / resistance. So meaning, even if we get some bullish price action from here, if we begin to change structure back to the downside from this previous level of resistance, then we can take the trade back to this point, flipping the weekly candle bearish. Then if we then get a close below here, then one can anticipate some sort of continuation to the downside. So to reiterate that point again, based on the weekly time frame, sales make sense. However, if you switch to the daily time frame, price is pushing to a level of support. So is either you need a close below the level of support to continue down, or you need some sort of pullback, not deeper than this, because if we pull back and get trapped above here, then price will just remain in this range or possibly see some breakout and continue to the upside. So you need some sort of pullback, not deeper than this. If the pullback is the option, then we need a break of support on the 4-hour time frame to then continue down. So that will lead me to look at what this then means on the 4-hour time frame. So really based on the 4-hour time frame, like I mentioned as well, if we get it close below this level of support on a daily, then we can continue. A risky selling opportunity really would be, this is Asian session and I don't trade the Asian session, but if we break below this low, it will be easy to retest this, which will be a weak fill on the daily time frame, and then see if we get continuation to the downside. And what is but since because of this session, is a highly low volume session, so I wouldn't be considering that at all. But just based on technicals, if we start breaking below that low, Then the range from here to here is like 39 pips. I'm not trading the Asian session, so I'll wait till London session. What I'm just trying to pass across based on the 4-hour time frame now is that, and also in relation to the daily time frame, it's that we get a close below here leading up to London session. With the London push, we can continue down. If the pullback is what we get before the push to the downside, I don't want the pullback to be deeper than this, such that if we break support from here, we can continue down. And what I mean by that is a price action, something like this, where price creates support, fails to continue to the upside, then breaks support. If I see this printed here on the 4-hour time frame, then it's an opportunity to take sales down, and that is in line with what we have discussed on the weekly time frame already. That is, in any case, pushing to the downside, creating lower resistances as well on the weekly time frame. So if I get this sort of price action that we have here previously printed here, I think we can get some sort of downside from that level of resistance on the daily time frame. Alternatively, if price closes below this level of support on the daily time frame, so we get a close below here, then it will be easier selling below this low, so that perhaps breaking this low, or if you still want to be very, very cautious, lower time frame resistance on 30 minutes after this closure, we can feel the range below here. And because of the rejections we have here, you want to take that trade during a volume time. So far I've only discussed this selling opportunity really, and which is really what makes sense. However, if we measure the range between this level of support and resistance, is 121 pips. So if you want to take some sort of buys, for instance, because everything is bearish, you will need possibly some sort of targets to be made, some sort of pullbacks, maybe above here, to target whatever high is created and see if you get the deep continuation to, the deep pullback to this point. I would not be buying at this price. If price gets here, then maybe supportable before looking for further buys. If I'm going to be trading, I would really be on the sell side mostly, and perhaps see that on the buys. And what we have for next week based on the data releases, I think we have I think CPI for the USD. Yeah, there's CPI on Wednesday. It's expected again to push up by 0.2%. It did so by 1.3% last month. So yeah, the inflation is still high. It's not going down yet. So if that is the case, it would mean a hawkish response in theory from the Fed, which will strengthen the dollar and then weaken pound USD. And since the dollar is the one that calls the short for this pair, whatever change in the dollar is what drives the price action for GU. Even though we have GDP month on month for GU on Friday, I would first of all be watching what happens with the CPI, which is the inflation report, and then redress the situation leading up to Friday. By Friday, you should already know what the trading history is for the week, so you could easily take the Friday off, for instance. So another thing you can see here is there's also PPI. This is for production, I think, inflation related to production. CPI is the inflation related to consumption. So yeah, I think they're expecting it to flat out already, which is a nice thing to see. But if it increases, then you should still expect some sort of strength in the dollar, and the fact that it should suggest an hawkish response from the Fed and increase the strength for the US dollar. That is in theory, really, because like I was trying to explain previously, at the instance of the release of the interest rate for USD, we saw some sort of momentary weakness in the dollar, but eventually I think we are still bearish. So just bear that in mind as you go into trading this week. So the summary of the trading opportunities, if I'm trading, I'll personally be looking for is sales, such that we get a close below here to take sales. It's either we push back this deep, change of structure from here to take it back down and see if we get continuation. If you really want to force the buys, mind my words, first force the buys. If you want to take any form of buys, at least wait for some sort of targets. Maybe if we say close above here, for instance, and hold support above, just bear in mind that that buy is a pullback phase on the weekly that can still result in a bearish weekly candle, for instance, overall. So doesn't mean buys does not make sense, but it means I would be cautious looking for buys. Perhaps I can still wait for the better buys, which would be if we can clear this zone by closing above and hold support above on the daily, then there wouldn't be any reservations to take buys really at that point. But for next week, if you see buying opportunity, just be careful. Take your profit as at when due, and I would personally be looking for sales if I'm going to be trading. So those are the things I'll be watching going into next week. This level right here, level daily resistance, daily support, close below, look for sales. Pull back to this point, look for sales. Mind the buying opportunity and focus majorly on sales. So I hope this helps and this gives some sort of clarification and forward guidance leading to this week. And trade sharp, and God bless.